Hello, Puny Podians. This is current day Ryan, or maybe slightly past Ryan, depending on when you're listening to this, what episode it's on the front of. Anyway, David and I have decided that we wanted to share with you some of our favorite content that we make. Our super secret spoiler show. These episodes are typically released via the Ears Up Patreon. However, we figured we're past the Infinity Saga. We might as well grab some of those Pym particles, run through the quantum realm, and release these super fun episodes from the past. A few notes before the episode starts. First, we don't have a language filter in these episodes, so Cap, cover your ears. Secondly, as the name implies, these have spoilers for everything up to and including any current releases at the time of recording. One last note, these were recorded about 2 years ago, and they undergo very, very little editing. In fact, the sound quality will kind of be what it is, and you'll kind of hear it change over time as I learn and change. Also, things we say might be a little bit out of date. We don't have Doctor Strange's time stone to be able to go back in time and correct ourselves and know the future. Anyway, I hope that you guys all enjoy this nonsense. And if you want to get these less than 2 years from when we record them, go join the Ears Up Patreon. The link is in the show notes as always. Enjoy the episode.
Thanks for visiting the TVA.
All right, y'all. Well, this is the super secret spoiler show for Iron Man with Puny Pod's own David and Ryan. That's
Ryan,
a terrible
what's
intro.
going on, my man?
Oh, not too much. We'll work out that intro. We will massage that intro because that was rough. But here we are.
Little insight. We are recording this 3 weeks after watching the original movie, but still super excited to talk about those items, the spoilers that we didn't get into in the original episode. So look forward to that.
Heck yeah, dude. Heck yeah. Well, before we start, since this is a little bit more adult and, we will take off the Cap language filter, I wanted to ask you, sir, what are you drinking tonight?
Thank you for asking. I am drinking a local beer, Pliny the Elder from Russian River Brewery. It is a delicious double IPA and a very favorite go-to drink on a cold winter night. How about you? What are you doing? What are you drinking?
Nice. Before we jump into what I'm drinking, I do want to say Pliny the Elder is like an event when it shows up around here. If it shows up in Colorado and like a restaurant has a keg, everybody flocks to that restaurant. Pliny the Elder is like I say, it's an event when it shows up around here. So.
Are you talking the elder or the younger? The elder.
The elder. I mean, the younger. They're maybe once a year. The younger will creep up somewhere in Colorado. That barely gets out here. I got to try it because I used to go to Great American Beer Festival every year down in Denver. So I did get to try younger one time, and it's good. But yeah, elder is like. In the beer groups I'm in on Facebook and stuff, if it shows up in a liquor store, everybody's posting about it and it's gone within the day.
Well, let me know. I can ship you some. I remember, it's funny. I was just talking recently about the very first time I bought Pliny. By the way, welcome to Beer Talk.
We wouldn't be on the Ears Up network without some beer talk.
I remember buying. This is years ago, and they had when they first started bottling it locally. And I live in the San Francisco Bay, not too far from the Santa Rosa facility where they brew it. And I contact the Whole Foods, and I go down, and it's a Wednesday. Like it's all sold out. I'm like, fuck. Okay, all right. Go out the next day, or the next week. I go out on Tuesday. And the shelves are empty, and I'm like, "What the hell?" Like, and they're like, "Can you just buy it all?" so then it's like 4 bottles, so we don't have to put on the shelves. And it was this very secret thing, and now it's like much more prevalent. But yeah, man, if you want some, let me know.
Nice.
Too. So
Yeah, I'll have to try and make it out there. I've heard like actually going to Russian Rivers Brewery is also pretty cool. But
you can go and they're known for a couple beers, but you can go and you basically get, if you want a tasting, you get a plank that's, I don't know, it's like 12, 16 1 2 ounce pours to get a sense for all the different ones. They make a lot of sours. They make a lot of, they've got their flagship beers, but they've got a lot of one-off projects, if you will. Yeah, next time you're around, let me know, man. We'll go hit it up.
For sure. Well, I hit up the beer fridge to check out what I had here in the studio, and I discovered that I had bought in like a mixed 6-pack at some point. I picked up a collaboration that Brewdog Brewing did with Iron Maiden, which, since we're talking about Iron Man, figured I should probably crack this one open. It's the Hellcat Cold IPA. And it's pretty tasty. This is the first time I've had it. The cold IPA is kind of a cool style. I know actually 21A, the sponsor of other shows on the network here, is making a cold IPA now too, and it's definitely a interesting style. It's an easier drinking with still all the good hops. So
interesting. I've seen I've just recently seen like cold IPAs, and my first response was like, well, no shit, like I want a cold IPA, but did not realize it was a different thing. So various, whether it's hazy in New England or like West Coast or whatever. So
yeah, it's from my understanding, it's like a lager with extra hop, which is good.
Yeah, so it's all good.
Cool, man. Well, let's jump into some spoilers. So as a reminder for everybody, and for ourselves, like David said, we're recording this well after having watched the movie and having recorded the first episode. So I wanted to do a little bit of reminders for us even. This is kind of our time to talk about what in Iron Man like links out to the rest of the MCU. So during the main show, we did not spoil these things. If you want to hear our breakdown of the movie, and you're just listening to this because it came through on like the Ears Up Patreon feed or whatever, definitely go check us out. Puny Pod is spelled PUNYPOD. We are on all major podcast apps. I double checked actually just before we were sitting down to record this, and I got us submitted to Google Podcasts and iHeartRadio. Those were the last two. If you are catching us, here on the Ears Up Patreon feed and you haven't listened to our show yet, please go check it out. Yes, the hour and 50-minute runtime is daunting, but I think it's good content, and it is not a watch along, so it's not like you hit play and then start the movie or anything like that. We do a breakdown of the movie in there, so probably won't include that in all of these secret shows, but I figured for those of you who are just catching us for the first time, some good information for you.
I would point out we are not in the top 10 yet. But podcasts, the little known technical fact, they only record the top 10 podcasts in the world. So I think we can reasonably claim like 12 or 14.
There you
maybe.
go. There you go. Yeah. Seems reasonable. Yeah. Just outside. Just
a bit outside.
All right. Well, David, so I think it makes sense to go through this kind of in order of things that connect out. I guess kind of in order of where they showed up in the movie.
Sure.
So one of the first people that links out was actually your MVP. You picked Jensen as your MVP. and I really liked. He's. It's interesting because in this movie, and for those of you who have not watched Iron Man in a while, go back and watch it, because we could honestly do a full breakdown of just the stuff that links back out to elsewhere in the MCU,
Mhm.
because at this point they bled that movie dry. They everything links to somewhere else, so I don't want to spend a lot of time, breaking down every single scene. But Yinsen, during the time where Tony's in the cave, Yinsen's like, we met at a conference in Bern, um, which actually links. We get to see that conference then, in Iron Man 3, which
Mhm.
Iron Man 3 perennial. I watch it every Christmas season because so help me God, it is a fucking Christmas movie. No one can tell me otherwise. Um, but it's really cool because you get to see that that comeback. You get to see that Yinsen having his conversation with Tony, on down in Tony's life.
Yeah. Very cool. Like it's a very cool. So the obviously it goes without saying that all the Iron Man movies, like the early ones, foreshadow the later ones, if you will. I enjoy the instant scenes much more on rewatch, mostly to to see how they did a really good job of creating this character who would eventually help to shift Tony's moral center, if you will.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously there's a confluence of events. He gets trapped on his chest and other things. He sees how his weapons are being misused. He used to have this naivete of around, if I, create the bigger stick, people be scared of the stick and we have peace. And obviously that is not the case. Um, I didn't enjoy is not the right word. I didn't appreciate Yinsen enough when I first watched him. And then when I watched him the second time, really, like, for me, in the rewatch, jumped out of this on the screen as this really important character, because they've got we talked about before, Iron Man's a really important movie. You have to nail Iron Man.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
because it's the first of the MCU. If it fails, if it pulls an Elektra, like, the MCU is screwed.
Yeah.
Right. Um, and they do a good job with, laying out a character development story in a short period of time. And Jensen's scene was like, he was great all the way through.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when you're watching Iron Man for the first time, Yinsen is kind of just a side character, right? And just kind of like guy number 3 who, just has
Yeah.
to push Tony along. Whereas, like, when you rewatch it, especially with the knowledge of everything else that happens in the universe, he's so much more impactful. So, the other thing, in the same time as we're seeing Yinsen, we're seeing the 10 rings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which 10 rings, to go back to Iron Man 3, kind of used and abused by Iron Man 3, and like a terrible representation of the Mandarin. I loved Trevor in Iron Man 3. Like, I have this weird like mixed feeling, because absolutely they destroyed the Mandarin idea in Iron Man 3. Now, go on down a few more movies and you get to Shang-Chi, phenomenal version of it, right? Great version of Mandarin and 10 rings. Iron Man 3, you get like a fake Mandarin.
So real quick.
Yeah.
Iron Man 3, in the comic books, right?
Mm-hmm.
The 10 rings, like, the Mandarin, these are the Mandarin is a serious Marvel badass who has these 10 rings that provide certain powers. In Iron Man 3, you have Ben Kingsley, Academy Award winner, playing Trevor, who is basically pretending to be the Mandarin character. And we'll get into it once we get into Iron Man 3. But it's this, it's a joke. It's a spoof, right?
Right.
And so there's the element of, God, they did the Mandarin dirty. He's just like he's a fucking drunk actor in the movie. And I'm like, what's happening right now? In Shang-Chi, it's like it's much more prevalent, and they do a better job of resuscitating it. But I remember at the time, I was just like, wait, what? Right?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah, and because you also got like hype, or at least I got hype. I got hyped because they showed the Mandarin in the trailers, right? And you're like, oh, cool, they're bringing in Ben Kingsley, and they're bringing in the Mandarin, like you said, badass in the comics, like super key villain for Iron Man as well, right? Like, kind of always was the antithesis to Iron Man's tech versus the Mandarin's mystic powers.
Yep.
So cool, but then they just shit the bed with it. So, but I do like that they retcon that come Shang-Chi, and we end up finding out in Shang-Chi that this version of the 10 rings that is operating out of Afghanistan is just one cell of the 10 rings, right? So the Afghani 10 rings that kidnapped Tony in Iron Man 1 is just one cell of the 10 rings, which I think that was definitely a retcon. I don't think at the time that they made Iron Man 1 they had any idea that 10 rings would come back and would end up being Southeast Asian again, right? I think they co-opted it to a Middle Eastern villain for the time and all that. We talked about that in the main episode of how this was very timely of a movie, and so I think they made it for the time. And I think they had, if you'd asked anybody probably at the time, they're like, oh yeah, we just moved the 10 rings into Afghanistan. They weren't thinking of it as a cell of, this master plan that we end up finding out in.
You raise really a point, which I think we need to kind of keep in mind as we start with episode 1 of the MCU. There's no big tapestry. Like, we don't know how the stuff is linked together. Like, they have some things which they do a very good job in later movies, like stitching together and bringing, tying in little things that you see in different movies, little kernels, little crumbs, the Captain America shield and all that kind of stuff. But they had no idea that it would work out as well as it did. And so, yeah, there's an element where we're throwing this out there. We don't anticipate this is going to come back in Iron Man 3. There may not even be an Iron Man 3.
Right.
If this movie bombs, there's no MCU. We're done. Like, you're licensing it out and, enjoy, Daredevil made by New Line Cinema or whomever, right? Like, enjoy multiple Spider-Man remakes by Sony.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was, so the 10 rings was a nice little like kernel. But what did you think? Like, the character who has the most prominent presence in the MCU, other than Robert Downey Jr. and Pepper and Rhodey, Agent Philip Coulson shows up in a completely oversized suit, which I cannot get past. Like,
yeah,
hey man, Indochino is $400. Jesus Christ, just go and get something in your size. But anyway, like, so what are your when you think of Philip Coulson, like, he's a huge character.
He is,
right?
He really is. He like you said, there's no way they knew it at the time. They didn't know what Phil Coulson was going to be. The most that they knew about the MCU, the biggest, I guess, gamble they took was that after credit scene, right? The idea of the Avengers Initiative being introduced by Samuel L. Jackson playing Nick Fury. But Phil Coulson, I kind of think, if I had to guess, I would guess Clark Gregg kind of just stole the show in some ways, and I feel like this movie probably, and his performance in this movie and the way he showed up, got him into the rest of the MCU and got him the part he has in the MCU. If I had to guess, like, they probably would have had a dozen different Shield agents just kind of popping in and out of the movies. Shield in the comics is kind of, it's a government agency, so there's a million different people who work for it, and there's Shield agents aplenty. And so I think, if maybe Phil Coulson hadn't shown up the way he did, or Clark Gregg, didn't give Phil Coulson the life he did, I kind of suspect that the story probably would have moved forward with just random Shield agent number 3 meeting Thor, and so on and so forth throughout the series. So it is cool though that like Coulson got to be the center point. Ultimately he got his show, right? Which I should mention here, we will not be reviewing the shows prior to the Disney Plus shows, which, by the way, those are like 3 years out for us to get to the Disney Plus shows. So don't hold us to that right now. But the plan as of today is to review those Disney Plus shows. Lot can change in 3 years. But yeah, Coulson got his show in Agents of Shield, which I watched some of, and it he's definitely enjoyable. And so I think he probably kind of carved out his space through this movie, if I had to guess.
It's a fair comment. His character, when you start talking about threads through the MCU, like Phil Coulson, we'll talk about him at greater length as we get to later movies. But the introduction to Shield, the importance of it, the flow through Nick Fury, the later stuff we get into when we start talking about Shield has been compromised by Hydra, all that stuff is really, really well done. And I will say that they did a really good job of planting this one kernel. Yeah, we don't see Jeff Bridges again. I love Jeff Bridges. He's fantastic in the movie. Like, his overacting is awesome, and I'm going to come back to that in a second. But the Philip Coulson character is really kind of, I think, sort of instrumental, because it binds together a bunch of different movies and takes things out of this kind of weird superhero, like, space fantasy realm into like, oh, this is actually stuff that's happening in the real world. And as we talked about before, a lot of Marvel comics, especially with the characters written in the 60s, there were elements of like responding to what was going on in the culture. There was like the anti-war movement. There was like some anti-government sentiment, depending upon. And so to see it develop, you talk about the Avengers, the weaponization, the Sokovia Accords. It's really well done.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely one of those things. And I think they, like you said, they couldn't have known how this movie was going to be used, but they've done a masterful job of going back and using every piece of this movie. Some minor ones that we don't have to spend too much time on, but like the cheeseburgers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tony comes back to the US, he wants cheeseburgers. Man, that like tears me up when I watch it. Now, because of when we see on down the line in Endgame, it there's the beautiful scene where Tony has died, he's made the sacrifice play, and his daughter Morgan is sitting there talking with Happy, and she just wants a cheeseburger. And man, Now you go back and it's a throwaway line, right? It's meant to kind of show that Tony's just kind of a joker, or, you know, kind of a comedic relief piece of him wanting a cheeseburger. Kind of became super meaningful because they reused it. Same thing with like the Tony has a heart thing. You know, same scene actually in Endgame. That ends up being his Viking funeral. They float out the proof Tony Stark has a heart.
Yep.
And with the way the MCU goes, some evil somebody is going to go pick up that arc reactor from the middle of that lake in Atlanta, and it's going to end up being reused in some, maybe Ironmonger will come back. He'll get that arc reactor and put it back in his suit.
So spoiler, Tony Stark is dead in the last Avengers movie. But to your point, the other one that I got on rewatch was the "I'm Iron Man" quote.
Yeah,
which he says at the press conference, and he says at the snap when he's snapping Thanos back. Like, so good. They did I cannot wait till we get to that point.
Yeah.
I apologize in advance. That is going to be a 2-hour episode, and you all just have to deal with it. It is so good. It's so good.
Maybe we'll break our release pattern and we'll release two episodes that month.
Maybe like I've again, not to get too far ahead, but I remember like watching Infinity War and leaving the theater. I was like stressed.
Yeah,
I was like, I gotta wait like months for this. Man,
yeah,
it's so good. One other. So we talked about Coulson. We talked a little bit. I want to go back to Jeff Bridges. We didn't talk about it in the main show, but one of the things I found out when doing a little bit of research was that Marvel, who has no experience making movies, they mostly license their stuff out, and they would make money off of the movies that Sony and New Line and 20th Century Fox and others would make. So the script evidently was not completely finished when filming began. And so the dialogue was often ad-libbed. This will be an issue in Iron Man 2, which we'll talk about. And it becomes a big issue. And that's one of the reasons why Iron Man 2 is perhaps perceived as kind of like disjointed. So, like Jon Favreau, who directed it, acknowledges that he felt like this made the film seem more natural. So some things were shot with 2 cameras to capture improvised lines. Robert Downey Jr., who seems to me like if he were comedian, very sharp, and like easy to send that. But like Gwyneth Paltrow and Jeff Bridges, both expressed like Gwyneth Paltrow said she had difficulty matching Downey. Yeah. And Jeff Bridges said he felt his comment was like he felt really uncomfortable not having a script or rehearsals since he's normally very prepared and knows his line word for word. And then finally realizing, quote, we were making a $200 million student film, and he took the pressure off. He's like, fuck it. The wheels are off. Don't care. And that made the movie seem light and joyful. Like, yeah. I appreciate the fun kind of ad-libby kind of stuff. I like smirking Robert Downey Jr. I like him, this very affable, comedic. He is very funny. Iron Man 2, it did not hold up. Right. But in this movie, played out well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this point has been beat to death by other podcasters, other reviews. That is what made the MCU successful, is at least the early movies, and we'll talk about this, I think, a little bit, because spoiler alert for those who are listening to this, between the time that we recorded the Iron Man episode and today where we're recording this after hours, both of us have watched The Incredible Hulk, so Obviously we have some opinions there, and I don't want to take too much away from our main show when we get there. But with the exception of the Incredible Hulk, I think the first phase of the MCU is very light. It is very fun, and that is what made Marvel successful versus DC, right? DC always wanted to be this brooding, dark comic book movie that like it's just so hard to get casual fans into that. Like getting somebody who's never read a comic book before into a dark brooding movie, like comic book movie, is so hard. And that's why I think some of the best Batman, I mean, don't get me wrong, dark brooding Dark Knight trilogy is phenomenal, but looking at on the other side of the aisle, if you will, at the MC or at the DC movies, those early Tim Burton movies were some of the best movies that DC has put out, and those were fun. They were silly. They played into the campiness that comics carry.
Yeah, we could, and maybe we say we have a separate after hour show to talk about the DCEU. I agree that the kind of campy, the kind of like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Dan DeVito as villains, like reminds you a little bit of the Batman TV show, which was extremely like campy and humorous. I think the DC got, I think they like the Dark Knight is a fantastic film. It is a great superhero movie. It's a great movie. It's fantastic, right? Fantastic performances. But I think the DC has taken the approach of like, oh, let's just make everything super dark.
Yeah.
And I think they're also penalized because unlike Marvel, the DC, we talked about this before, the DC characters followed a certain archetype. And so everything, like the characters were all perfect. Like you couldn't pick up on Wonder Woman flaws or the Flash or what have you, or Superman. And everything had to have this gravitas that didn't necessarily have to happen in the MCU.
Yeah.
And we could have a big what if around, like, what if, Kevin Feige took over the DCEU as opposed to the MCU, which I'm glad he did not, because I prefer Marvel, the Marvel properties. But you can see where in 2008 when The Dark Knight comes out, like that shifted everything.
Yeah.
And everything is grainy and dark and like it's great for Batman, but it's not great for the other stuff.
Right. And I think like similarly over on our side of the aisle here in the Marvel world, Marvel knew to like introduce some of those heavier concepts, like get down to the Eternals, right? The Eternals, Black Widow, those are more serious movies. Those have much more gravitas, much more realism to them. And but they knew to not introduce that till like several phases in, right? You kind of have to bait people in with the candy, with the brain candy, right? And not to say Iron Man is pointless. Like it's a very good movie. Obviously, we talked all about that in the main show. I love it. But it's definitely easygoing. It doesn't take a lot of digestion. Whereas like getting into, especially now where we sit today in the multiverse saga, talk about taking some digestion, right? A different type of digestion. It's not dark or anything per se, but it takes a lot of understanding. And so you kind of have to prime your viewers. You have to get people into it. And I think that's something that the MCU does so well, is it has figured out how to prime the wide audience to what it's doing, and it knows how to. Kevin Feige, or Kevin the supercomputer, if you watch She-Hulk, knows how to kind of drive everybody to the point where you need to get to, so that you can do multiverse of madness kind of stuff, or the trailer that just came out this week as of recording, Quantumania, which is gonna be weird. It's gonna be wild, and if that had been your first release, I don't think the MCU would be where it is today. Yeah.
So as was suggested in a message, that if we did a rewatch of the MCU A to Z, Ant-Man, Ant-Man 2, Ant-Man Quantumania, like, it would be bizarre, right? Yeah, I mean, we'll talk when we get closer to. We'll talk. We will get into all the Quantumania. Like, so as a comic book reader back in the 70s and 80s, like, didn't get into like all the different realms and the 616 and all the different realities and the branch chain, all that kind of stuff. And I like to think of myself as fairly comic nerdy. And while I will appreciate the education and the illustration and the what they're going to do, there's a whole group that'll be like, oh wait, that dude's dead. Why is he back again? Like,
Yeah.
why is Thor now this character? Why have these things changed? And I don't have, but I'm here for it. I am down for what Kevin Feige will lay out. Like, he has done a fantastic job. I implicitly trust whatever he's doing, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, because I think it will pay off, but you have to kind of build all that stuff up. And I realized that, like, a lot of what they did in phase 4 was doing that very thing. Right.
Yeah. I think you're headed towards a point where the MCU's at an interesting point, because it's simultaneously super successful while also almost suffering from its own success, because somebody who's new, like, I couldn't imagine a 13-year-old kid trying to get into the MCU today, right? 30 movies that your parents didn't let you watch, and now, like, okay, I want to watch Quantumania, that's the new one coming out. Oh, I have 30 movies to catch up on to understand how we got here. Oh, wow. And obviously,
a lot of homework. Yeah.
That's why our podcast exists, so that people can get caught up. But no, like, I think I do think, like, modern day where we are with the MCU, it is going to be tricky, and it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out, for sure.
I think they do. I think Marvel does a pretty good job of, and this is a tough tightrope to walk, which is puts out a movie that on its own is enjoyable, which also includes kernels, which also include for future things and past things, which also includes something for all the comic fans.
Yeah.
Right. And which lays groundwork for future things. Right. So I could just go see Ant-Man by itself. It's fun. It's a heist film. Right.
Right.
I can enjoy it. But I also know that Ant-Man appears in, like, Captain America Civil War and, like, all this other stuff that happens down the line. You start getting into, like, time travel and builds towards other things, if you will. And so they do a really good job of that. And so for that reason, I'm looking forward to the next phase. But it's sort of like, I describe it as, okay, got a magician. He or she's going to do a magic act. I know what the trick's going to be. How do they pull it off?
Yeah.
Right. Like, I trust they will do it, because it's, but there's the element of like, how are they going to do it? And then you watch, you're like, oh, wow, that's how they did it. That's fantastic. So, so for purposes of like Iron Man, like we talked a little bit about, like we talked in the main show about the background, the scenes. I'm gonna diverge for just a moment. Like you have had and probably present like a world ranked facial hair beard.
Yes.
In this movie, we see some and this is going to be a theme that we're going to touch on in a few movies. We see some wild facial hair, principally Robert Downey Jr., Tony Stark, weird kind of like zigzag facial hair, and Obadiah Stane. And I want your thoughts on the respective facial. We'll start with Obadiah. Full plumage, nice beard. Might be taped on. Don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, so Obadiah has in the bearding world. So a little bit of background for everybody. I once upon a time did competitive bearding. I competed in the World Beard and Mustache Championships in Austin, Texas. And I did so my category is full beard with a styled mustache. At the time I had a 12-inch or longer beard, so I was in that subcategory. So Obadiah has what in the bearding world we would call a business beard, or a beard under 4 inches off the chin. Honestly, it looks great. It looks very full. I couldn't tell if it was taped on. If any of my old bearding friends are listening, ask your local whiskerina to check and see if that looks like a fake beard. They would be the ones to know. But yeah, I think it was a good beard, and it fit his face well. I think Obadiah rocked that beard for sure.
So as a side note, like I realized this is not going to be an emerging segment, but okay. Because I had no idea about the classifications. It looks good. Like I thought he looked looks great, looks clean, looks tight. I didn't realize the classifications. I struggle on rewatch with the Robert Downey Jr. one because I realized in the comic book he's got a specific, like he's got some cool zigzag kind of facial hair, but I remember first watching it and I'm just distracted. So I need your thoughts on Robert Downey Jr.'s facial hair.
Yeah, in this one it looks rough, and I actually had in my notes, and we didn't bring this up in the main show. He keeps it incredibly well kept in that cave. So whatever they're doing,
right?
And that actually has I can't remember. I was over here trying to Google it to find it. There's actually a category of beards that is so. In the bearding world, there's freestyle, which freestyle is crazy. I was on a billboard once upon a time with a freestyle beard. Yeah, I'm leaving little kernels for future weirdness. But like there's a category of bearding where you shave designs into your beard. And I can't remember what it's called. It's got a German name, but anyways, that's what Tony's beard always reminds me of, is like it's like that razor cut in, and it does not look good in this movie. At the end of the day, it's not like, even as somebody who is hair sweet as I am, it is not distracting necessarily for me, but it's definitely weird.
To your point, it is consistent throughout the film, which I appreciate. So it's not like some weird zigzag is there and then it's gone and all of a sudden it's weird. I'm not gonna lie, I am so excited for this category going forward. Like this is I am so excited. I am thinking ahead to future films.
Yeah.
This will be great.
Yeah.
This will be great.
This should be super fun. And yeah, maybe I can get some of my old bearding guys. Maybe we can get some guests out of the bearding guys. We'll see. Some of them
Hell
are
yeah!
annoyed
Like
enough.
we could have our bearded rankings. Like so far, it's Obadiah number 1, Tony Stark number 2.
There
Good to
we go.
know, because we're gonna get into it in the next few movies.
Yep.
Thor,
Thor,
Whiplash has a beard.
yeah.
Right? He's got a little facial hair.
I don't think Thor has a full beard in Thor.
No, yeah, you're right.
Because that, not to spoil too much for a future episode, I'm going to make sure this comes back up to tell the full story. But I had a roommate at the time that Thor came out who hated the movie, or Thor 2. He hated the movie because in the comic books, there's a storyline where Thor gets his beard when he becomes King Thor. And in Thor 2, Thor had a beard and he lost his ever living shit about it. So, yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's funny, and it's comic book people, man. Yes, we are comic book people. But man, the things that people find to like talk about sometimes just crack me up.
So yeah, we will operate as buffers between. So the thought is like we will instill and share like comic book background, trivia, detail, stuff from the movie, but it is our promise to you that we will shield you from that level of comic book obsession.
Yeah,
You don't have to worry about that.
Yeah,
I've never heard the bear thing before. That's wild.
Yeah, I have it. Yeah. So yeah. To get back to Iron Man though, to route us back, I guess the one other like tie into the rest of the universe that I wanted to talk a little bit about was Rhodey. So Rhodey sees the suit, which will eventually be his. And actually, I liked that ultimately they used the same. They use the same suit, like that. The silver Mark II ends up being Rhodey's suit. That ends up being the first Iron Patriot or Iron War Machine. Jeez Louise.
Yep, War Machine. Yep.
Ends up being the first War Machine. And so we see Terrence Howard, who suspiciously doesn't look like Rhodey looks next time. Say next time, baby, which is so cool. And I'm glad they brought back the same exact suit. They figured that, they gave that honor. I think we talked about this in the main show, but man, I'm so glad they got rid of that. Terrence Howard threw a bitch fit about his pay to the point where he was no longer welcome on that set.
So there were so we talked a little bit about it, but there were two things. One, so he signed, my reading was he was one of the first actors to sign. He had the biggest salary in the movie, even despite having the fourth largest role at best.
Yeah.
Right. The next movie comes out. He is offered a smaller role and a smaller salary. He pitches a fit. There's also reports on the set that Favreau had difficulties with him, with his scenes and his interpretation of the character. We talked about before that there was no real chemistry between him and Robert Downey Jr. It just seemed all very kind of stilted and forced. They didn't really seem like friends. Like you don't sense that kind of like that chemistry between the two. And yeah, placed him like we will not get into this episode. I promise on the next one we get into either the main show or the after show when we talk about the casting. they figured out the formula pretty quick. And for folks that didn't fit into the formula, Terrence Howard, other actors in the MCU like Edward Norton quickly figured it out.
Yeah.
And solved it for the future, if you will. So,
yeah, for sure. For sure. And then I guess, yeah, I said that was the last thing. We talked about it already a little bit. Obviously, we saw the Avengers Initiative get introduced, which so cool. I mean, I don't know that there's much to say about that so much as it was really cool to see it introduced.
I thought one of the things that I really liked them dropping little kernels. Mm-hmm. Here's Iron Man. Here's the shield for Captain America. Here's Thor. Here's Hulk, right? When you look at future phases, I'm very excited personally for X-Men when it comes out.
Yeah.
And so whether they will drop, I mean, they've already dropped certain kernels in terms of like enhanced individuals. You talk about the Eternals fighting deviants. You've got Miss Marvel, who's
a mutant, apparently.
I think she's mutant.
Yeah.
I think she's officially a mutant. And so it'll be interesting to see if they do it the same way. But again, kudos to the producers and creative minds behind the MCU to like have a scene for like, this is the chapter of this book we will tell. Hopefully the book is successful and we can write future books. But they did a great job. Fantastic job. And love that little foreshadowing, as you said. Like once I saw that, I was like, oh shit, they're going to make an Avengers movie. This is going to be fucking great.
Yeah.
I can't can I fast forward my life to get to the Avengers movie? Because I'm 300% in for it.
Absolutely. Cool, man. Well, I know you had an idea. We were talking just before we started. You had an idea for a what if.
So I do. So What If was a famous comic book series that would take a character, a scenario, and change it up. So what if Captain America, and there's a whole TV series which talks about it. In my mind, my big what if is like, what if Robert Downey Jr. is not cast as Tony Stark? What if it's Tom Cruise, Nicolas Cage, any of the other people we've thought about that have been mentioned? Do we end up at the same spot? I think that to answer my own question, I think that Tom Cruise is enough of a presence to pull it off, but Timothy Oliphant, there were a bunch of names. So what would have happened? Because I feel like Robert Downey Jr.'s personal history persona lends itself perfectly for Tony Stark. Flawed person on display, public knows, and I honestly can't imagine anyone else in the role. But what if someone else did it? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting. I know, so for Multiverse of Madness, there was rumors that we were going to get our Tom Cruise Iron Man.
Totally.
Kind of disappointed we didn't. That would have been cool to see. But I think Tom Cruise would have fit, especially I want to say by 2008 he had gone through some of the Scientology, the spaz on Oprah's couch kind of stuff. So I think Tom Cruise could have fit. Timothy Oliphant maybe less so, because he's less that character, right? And I think going to Marvel's casting, top to bottom, a lot of these actors are embody the characters. Whether it's Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, or it's I cannot pronounce her name, but the young woman who played Ms. Marvel. She is a huge Marvel fan who just goes and like was at Comic Cons and stuff, which is perfect for that character. To some degree, Mark Ruffalo, which we'll talk about in our next main episode, the other Hulk. But Mark Ruffalo, you can see him being very Bruce Banner like, and so I think that's something that like that's where like the idea of a Timothy Oliphant maybe works, but he isn't that character in life. He's not Robert Downey Jr. Or he's not Robert Downey Jr. He's not like Tom Cruise fits Tony Stark because he has gone through some of those struggles, and it would have, I think, fit to some degree.
Yeah, I could say that. Eccentric, right? Like
Yeah.
charismatic, like, there's a little ego thing there for sure.
And in my head, now I'm talking myself into the wildest one that you posited, which is Nick Cage. Nick Cage is Iron Man, which would be absolutely a different movie. 150% a different movie. But also, like, he's a Coppola child, like, has lived a pretty public life. Maybe he wouldn't be as bad as my initial reaction was.
So I think the other one who was considered for it was Hugh Jackman, and would have been interesting had he gotten it, like the impact on Fox's, X-Men run.
Yeah.
Nicolas Cage, like if you want to pull like a, Al Pacino overacting moment, like maybe Loki, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, but I can't see like Robert Downey Jr. Like
They need to bring him back as Morbius so he can be a vampire again.
Okay.
A vampire!
Yeah, like maybe okay. All right. So running bit. We have to workshop this bit. Nicolas Cage, what role is he in this movie? And maybe that's just the running theme of like, because he is such a superhero fan. He auditioned for Superman, Iron Man. He got Hellraiser. Like, I think he might. I can't remember if he did Batman as well, but like, he loves superhero films. So maybe let's for every episode we're like, oh, what's his role? Not in this one, not Iron Man.
Oh man,
maybe Obadiah Stane, right?
Yeah.
A little overacting, hamming it up, right?
Yeah, I think Obadiah Stane was already overacted, so I think the brain goes there quickly. But I think it goes there well.
Oh, maybe he turns it way down and he's Jensen.
Oh man, that would be hilarious.
All right, we should stop now.
Yeah,
like, this is
yeah.
we're just diverging. So
especially because I think the more that's not a path I want to tread, I don't think. But yeah, any I guess I feel like that's most of our content here for this after show. So anything else you got?
no, I feel wrapped up. Like I am I'm looking forward to the Incredible Hulk, sorry. And I for future episodes of the super secret show, to go back and to see where we were and see how everything builds on the future things. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Cool. Well, as is tradition with Puny Pod, it is not puny. Our original, just a little bit of behind the scenes, our original plan was 30 minutes. At recording, we're at an hour. We're crossing the hour mark as I speak. Editing, you'll probably hear this at less than an hour, but that's all right. But yeah, so if you're catching us, again, like I said earlier, if you're catching us for the first time on the Ears Up Patreon, if you're just, if you have your RSS feed set to the Ears Up Patreon, you're used to hearing the secret show, and now you also get to hear the Supreme Resort After Dark. Check us out, Puny Pod. We're on all the major podcatchers. I should have probably said this earlier. Maybe I'll edit that. I'll go back and edit in a little explanation of the show. But we do rewatch the MCU in release order. So check out Iron Man. I would also check out our Legends episode. We did a lot of research into that. Like David did a hell of a lot of research, and it was awesome. And so don't, I know a lot of podcasts do those intro episodes and you kind of just skip it because who gives a shit. But really that intro episode is really interesting and definitely something to check out. And then our next episode is on The Incredible Hulk. Make sure you watch, if you are watching along with us, make sure you watch The Incredible Hulk, not Ang Lee's Hulk with Eric Bana as Bruce Banner, not the 70s TV show with Lou Ferrigno as the Hulk. We are watching The Incredible Hulk with Ed Norton. If you're having trouble finding it, it is on HBO Max. It is, I think, one of the few departures we're going to have to take from Disney Plus to be able to watch this. So check it out and follow along with us. That episode should be coming out. We are targeting release the 7th of February. So that's the first Tuesday of the month. That is incidentally when we released Iron Man. So we'll try and target the same the first Tuesday of each month. So we'll see how we go there, but that's our target. So other than that, David, anything else you got to add?
No, I'm good. I appreciate the super fun nerding out as always.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate your time, man. And I hope everybody enjoyed the super secret spoiler show, and we will see you on the next one. Take it easy, y'all.